So I love that. Especially you always get like the parent that shows up on that day, they're going to wing it because they really didn't take it seriously, but they still have to say something.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
So
cool.
do you give them like a template and they just get to fill it out like a Mad Lib? Like insert
Yeah.
name,
No, not
insert
that.
adjective?
You are listening to the Asian American Youth Ministry Roundtable, part of the Rooted family of podcasts, advancing gospel-centered youth ministry for those serving in Asian American contexts and their students, equipping those serving to more effectively disciple students, and empowering families and churches to minister to Asian American youth more faithfully.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Rooted Asian American Youth Ministry Roundtable. It is my joy and privilege to be your host today. My name is Huey, and today I am joined by two good friends who have wealth of wisdom and experience to share with us about life and ministry in the Asian American church context. So I'll have to introduce themselves, maybe starting with Terrence. Share with us a little bit about yourself and your ministry, and what is one thing you are looking forward to, or one thing you want to do or accomplish in 2025?
All right. Good to see you guys and talk to you guys. My name is Terrence Shay. I'm the family pastor at First Chinese Baptist Church of Walnut. I have three kids ranging from middle school to high school to college. And when I think about 2025, it actually means a lot of personal things for me, but ministry-wise, I just would like for us as a church, as we're going through a season of transition and also a season where we're bringing in new staff and also onboarding new youth counselors, to be one in which we could finish the year well. And this is a year in which we actually are talking about some pretty sensitive cultural issues to kick off 2025. And so I just hope that one step at a time that we're able to encourage and equip our counselors and our parents to be able to journey together for the long run.
What's going on, everyone? Justin Wong from Houston, Texas. I am a pastor and youth advocate, especially in the Asian American context. One of my dreams, hopes, goals, challenges for 2025, I want to catalog all my books.
Wow.
So I've started, and there's apps you can use to just scan the barcode. And I want to make sure I have my whole library ready to go, so that if anyone needs it, or if any of you listeners want to borrow some, I'll ship it to you.
Nice.
For ministry and personal pleasure.
Wait, so how many books are we talking about, Justin?
Okay, so I brought my entire library back at my house right now. I have probably about 25-ish stacks, and each stack covers about 100.
Oh my goodness gracious,
I don't
man.
think a year is enough, man. I don't think a year is enough.
By the way, just pro tip, like boxing books and everything is the worst thing you can do. My back hurts. It's been about a week and a half. Dude, get someone else. Like pay some people to do it for you. It's terrible. Especially commentaries. They're like £1,000. Ridiculous.
I thought you were going to go towards, hey, just get your youth to do it. I'm glad he didn't. There you go.
No. Yeah, you gotta sign waivers. All right, Huey, what about you, man?
One thing that I want to accomplish in 2025 is maybe take maybe a longer trip with my family. I realize I have now, my oldest is in high school. As I get older and older, I just feel like time just goes by faster and faster.
Yeah.
And I want to make a little bit more memories. So maybe taking a longer trip, maybe an international trip with just my whole family,
Oh yeah.
kind of savor that time. So it's my goal, 2025, but we'll see if it happens or not. But if it does, man, I think it'll be something beautiful for our family,
And
so
I'm rooting for you on that.
yeah, thanks. Hey, Justin, by the way, once you catalog your library, take a picture. I want to see what that looks like. I think that's going to be
It's
gonna look
it's ridiculous. You don't want to see the books.
It's
a
going
lot
to
of
put
books.
his current background to shame. Like once he actually
probably.
catalogs it all.
Friends, we begin a two-part roundtable conversation on healthy rhythms of grace for resting and rejoicing in the gospel. And by rhythms of grace, we're talking about habits and routines we cultivate and keep that grounds us in the truth and grace of the gospel as we are in the trenches of life and ministry. And especially as we navigate the challenges and complexities of serving in Asian American youth ministry context, we are asking the question, how can we help ourselves and help our students and families develop rhythms that enable them to rest and rejoice in the gospel in the midst of busy, chaotic, and even anxious lives? So part one of our roundtable conversation focused on personal rhythms of grace. And if you have not yet listened to that, I want to encourage you to do so. But today, for part two, our focus is on corporate rhythms of grace. How do we help our students and their families cultivate rhythms so that they can rest and rejoice in the gospel? And maybe even thinking about how do we structure our ministries so that resting and rejoicing is embedded into the very fabric of our ministries.
We are thrilled to announce Rooted's new book with New Growth Press, The Jesus I Wish I Knew in High School, Asian American Edition. Being a teenager is itself an overwhelming experience, but the struggles unique to Asian American teenagers can often lead them to wonder if anyone truly knows what they're going through. In this book, 12 authors come alongside Asian American students to share their own high school experiences, helping students to see how Jesus makes a difference in our unique struggles. Jesus sees them and knows them fully. These testimonies of growing up Asian American include struggles with belonging, performance pressure, fear of failure, living in an honor-shame culture, eating disorders, sexual assault, and adoption. The writers now walk faithfully with Jesus in their ethnic and cultural distinctions. These stories lift up the Asian American experience with dignity, offering representation and belonging. We hope you'll read this book and share it with the Asian American teenagers in your home or church.
So, to start us off, maybe I can start with Justin for this one. What are some ways that you have celebrated and prepared your ministry for the new year in the past? What are some things that you have kind of practiced?
Okay, so this is we do this on and off. I think every year, especially we look at the fall to see where we are, right? If we're like, hey, we're really in a good spot, then January comes around, then we try to adjust accordingly. But so what we've done in the past was we try to, because we know that the youth counselors and the parents are coming off a crazy busy season, especially November, December. And so what we've tried to do is we try to use January just to slowly onboard. So it mirrors almost our August. So it is reframing the purpose of the ministry, reframing what it is to be gospel-centered. So kind of basics. So all 4 weeks of kind of a refresher. And so give the leaders a little bit of break, have no kind of formal teaching that way. I'll do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the teaching and the grounding. But we kind of use it as a reframing, restructuring so that we go from January to May as our next block. And so we don't just jump straight into our normal calendar cycle. We just go, hey, here's the goals for this semester. Here's what we would like. And we try to use the first 2 weeks really to reflect maybe the first week, and the second week in January, we try to go, hey, this is where we want to go. So it's kind of that rhythm so that we're not just jumping straight into the new year without kind of pausing a little bit.
How about you, Terrence?
I mentioned at our last episode that we have a retreat coming out of this year. So there's so much that then is up in the air for how the youth ministry will start. But I do know that our first unit for the upcoming quarter is going to be talking about, very sensitive cultural issues like sex and gender, LGBTQ. And this is actually part of our rhythm every single year, in that in the fall, in the winter quarter, we have a worldview series. And so we're kind of gearing ourselves for that in terms of the preparation for teaching, but then in how we would engage with parents and also with the youth counselors and prepare the students for it. So I wouldn't say it's like super intense in that sense, even though the topics are sensitive, but it is where we turn a corner to, reboot for the opportunity to think about, what it means to follow Jesus and what it means to know him and to walk with him.
Terrence, when we talk about like getting into your new lessons, is that like different than December? Like, is January different than December, or does it carry from December to January and you continue it?
Yeah, it's different. So January through March, and I think this year it's going to go into April a couple of weeks because Easter is later. We're just going to be doing a separate unit that stands alone on these issues of sex and gender.
So, when we think about kind of these rhythms of grace, because the goal is to help our students rest and rejoice, right, in the gospel, in the midst of, a lot of things that they're involved in, a lot of things that give them a lot of pressure and maybe even anxiety. And I do think, particularly for Asian American students and their families, the idea of resting, an idea of rejoicing is hard because we're
Mm.
so used to going and going and going and achieving and achieving and achieving. So resting and rejoicing is difficult. What do you guys think as people who have been in ministry for a long time, especially in the Asian American ministry context? Why do you think it is so hard for our students and even their families to actively rest in the gospel and to actively rejoice in the gospel? And both those things are, I think important.
On a theological basis, right? I think a lot we're just prone to wanting to earn, right?
Mm.
Do things. It's hard. I think we said this in one of our older podcasts. Like for me, it's hard to receive, be on the receiving end of things because I just either I don't feel like I'm deserving of it or because I haven't earned it,
Mhm.
right? And so I think rest is very similarly tied to that concept of, hey, I don't deserve this. I know once I work, for decades, then maybe I can rest after that. But there's
Mm.
not this rhythm of rest built into our culture, but even in our theology sometimes, right? We think the seventh day is for when we retire, versus built into every day or every week. So I think
Yeah.
that's just part of it. I think another one is just calendaring, man. Like the older students get and families continue to navigate, it's just more busy. And so I know, especially in the spring semester, you're looking at, an upping in sports, performances, and that's just how schools have calendar it. APs, SATs, all of that stuff is going to happen around that time. Prom, graduations. So all your big events are going to happen around that time.
Yeah, and for the seniors, man, the APs for sure, but then also college acceptances. So I feel
Yeah.
like they're riding, as they're turning into new year. Maybe there's some hope and excitement for the new year, but many are actually more anxious and fearful of what the future holds, especially as they're looking sideways towards their friends and the cultural and parental expectations, as well as their own personal expectations for achievement and for what they want their future to look like.
And I really appreciate both of you guys said that because I think this is a two-parter where I think it's worthwhile for us to have conversations with students, directly about idea of resting and idea of rejoicing. But also I think parents need to be part of that conversation, right,
Mm.
as well. So, and any tips on how do you engage with students about actively resting and rejoicing in the gospel in the midst of all that they are exposed to and all that they need to do? But also, how do you any tips on how to engage parents in that conversation?
In one sense, as someone working with students, you need to start with the school calendars. Now, if your kids are coming from a lot of different school districts, you're gonna have to compile the school calendars. I think that serves as a baseline of going, hey, where are the rhythms of a natural school year?
Mhm.
Where are your breaks? Where are your vacation times? Where are your final exams, midterms? Just to see that rhythm first, and then you can start planning through it. Because I think working with the parent, they're going to use the school calendar as the baseline. Like that's not going to change.
Mhm.
Now, from there, as a youth minister, you can be very strategic. Where can we start to put in more events, pull events out? I think that's a good partnership with parents to say, hey, my kid is going to have 4 major exams back to back to back to back, plus a competition, plus these things. I should not plan a high level, event in the youth ministry at that moment because you're making it more stressful for us as a family. That's how you work with the parents. But you need to do that early on and to go, hey, I'm watching, I want to make sure that our youth calendar and your family calendar is as closely aligned as possible so that we can start doing that. I know that doesn't answer your question, which I'll let Terrence answer, but I think strategically that helps parents. I mean, as a parent, I'd be like, hey, thanks for actually considering all the things that are going on in our life.
Mhm.
No, that's so wise. I mean, seriously, the school calendar drives the day, and it's not like a morally like objective situation here. It's that's what it is. And so the more we can come alongside, and even in aiming to disciple their kids, show that we're journeying and walking with them. It really helps. On my end, in terms of my thoughts towards this, how we can encourage parents would really be, letting them know what we're trying to pass on to their students, in terms of their achievements, expectations, and that their kids' identities, as much as it is hard for them to get out of their matrix of evaluation, it can't be resting on their academics and their achievements alone. So I feel like that's beating a drum that will probably never cease to be beat, because we're kind of raised and wired that way culturally, to measure one another based on our achievements. But a lot of times, man, you want the kids, especially if they come through possibly seasons of disappointments, to know that their parents are on their side. And oftentimes they feel like not only are they dealing with their own disappointments, but they're dealing with their own parents' lack of approval, for their efforts. And so, yeah, just coming alongside parents and speaking to them in various contexts is so important, so that they would actually be on the side of their kids in discipling them and kind of building those relational bridges for the long run.
I think another helpful thing with parents in terms of at least thinking through the semesters is giving them a little bit of what to expect. What are the goals and objectives for the semester? Mm-hmm. If the parents, I find like more parents rather have that than not have it, because what it does, it gives a little bit of rubric of going, hey, this semester, by this time, we as a youth ministry or as a church, we want to equip our students to do A, B, and C, right? Mm-hmm. Now, again, you don't want to take it too far and just be legalistic about it, but to go, hey, these are some goals and directives that we would like to see, and these are some of the ways we're going to help you disciple your students to accomplish these objectives, right? Because I think parents do respond to going, hey, at least I know what to expect. I know the timeline, and hopefully by the summer months, I have XYZ conversations with my students, and that's a low bar for expectations and objectives.
I really love that we are actively giving our families, especially our parents, kind of a window into how much we think about our ministry and our students. We think about like just a year in advance. We're thinking about different seasons and different points. And I think again, this is our way of helping our families navigate an entire year together. Mm-hmm.
Join us for our first ever Asian American Youth Worker Training Day, where we'll explore the topics that bridge the gap between the heart, hands, and head of Asian American youth ministry. Our hope is to encourage, empower, and equip youth workers in the distinct and unique trenches of Asian American youth ministry, culture, language, and multiple congregations, etc. What will set this training day apart from any other youth ministry training conference is having the content and teaching set to the unique context of Asian American youth ministry. No more wondering how we'll implement these practices and strategies to our context, or getting discouraged that what we learn, we can't do these things in the way we're told we ought to. We're going to think about the heart of youth ministry, be encouraged by plenary speakers who together have over 50 years of youth ministry experience, and workshops that offer training and insights into the hard issues for youth ministry to Asian American churches and teenagers. We're going to think about the hands, attend workshops that offer practical training and equip you with skills that are essential for youth ministry. Finally, we're going to think about the head, be a part of the larger discussion on the direction of Asian American youth ministry and where it's headed. We believe sincerely at Rooted Ministry and Sola Network that Jesus loves and has gifted Asian American youth workers in their churches to reach students we're called to. We want to help come alongside you, and we hope that you'll meet new youth ministry friends through this day together. Register now. The conference is for all youth workers, pastors, volunteers, and teachers, etc.
In your ministries, especially as Asian Americans, I feel like we're not so good at celebrating milestones, celebrating markers, right? How have you guys incorporated like celebrations and rejoicing just corporately, and I think that's a big part of what it means to be a believer. We celebrate what the Lord has done and what the Lord is doing. How have you guys practiced that in your ministries?
I mean, in
First,
addition to, various, gatherings and parties, which I feel like people can do and probably generally do anyway, something that we intentionally do with especially eighth grade graduates as they promote from middle school to high school, which probably parallels more of a biblical timeline of maturity and adulthood, even though we know that that's not exactly the same nowadays. But we plan intentionally a ceremony together as part of a celebration to where the parents are not only encouraged, but they're given as a homework assignment to write a letter of blessing for their children. So as much of this that parallels in a sense, of affirming a child, in the Israelite culture of being now someone that's able to be accountable to the law and keeping it for him or herself as part of the covenant community. I want the parents to be invested in the future growth and discipleship of their children through the writing of this letter. And the funny thing is, maybe for us who are in ministry, we think, oh, yeah, we could write stuff, it doesn't take that long. I'm sure we could, make it pretty sensible and understandable. But for so many of these parents, especially growing up in Asian American culture, this is like the first time they've ever written or articulated anything of substance that is meant to affirm and bless their kids, not for their accomplishments, but simply for who they are, and to encourage them to continue to know and love the Lord. Now, these are the Christian parents, and we certainly have non-Christian parents as well, who we invite to participate in this. And maybe some of the things that they share are not anchored on the gospel per se, and it's more, maybe merit-based or maybe more just culturally based, but it's still them jumping into the lives of a major milestone of their child who is graduating and becoming more mature, that then makes a memory. So that's something that I look forward to every single year as something that our church supports and sponsors, but then also that reaches into every single home to be able to get them involved.
Well, that's awesome.
dude, that's really good. Yeah, we do something similar, not at eighth grade, but I think it's when they turn to a teen.
Mhm.
I mean, it's arbitrary. It's kind of a rite of passage.
Mhm.
What we'll try to do is the family initiates, and let's just say it's a eighth grade boy, right? He'll bring in his youth leaders, pastors, grandparents, and people of significant faith, and they will write the letter and they'll read it out to him in a circle, and then we'll take turns laying hands and praying over. And then they get to keep the letters for the rest and as a way of remembering it. But
That's great.
been trying to do that. I mean, again, in an Asian culture, this is really hard, not just to articulate, Terrence, like what you said, but to even verbalize, hey, this
Mhm.
is, and use the words, I love you, or I'm proud of you. And to
Yeah.
have the
And
students audibly hear that from either an uncle or a grandparent or their dad, like that, those are massive, moments of memory for them. It, helps with set grounding your faith.
Yeah.
now, for me, I just enjoy seeing the parents being under pressure for once. It's like, oh, hey, kids, read your Bible. Hey, kids, go to
Mhm.
fellowship. Hey, kids, do this, do that. Oh, wait, I have to do this now too. I have to write something. I have to prepare something for my own child. Yes, you do. So I love that. Especially, you always get like the parent that shows up on that day. They're going to wing it because they really didn't take it seriously, but they still have to say something.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
So
cool.
do you give them like a template and they just get to fill it out like a Mad Lib, like insert
Yeah.
name,
No, not
insert
that.
adjective?
I give them an outline of like things that
Okay.
they can talk about, but really, I also they do vary in terms of their commitment and taking it seriously or not. But they all do have to say something, even if they're literally winging it on the spot.
That's awesome.
And it's a photo opportunity for them as well. It's just a good memory.
Yeah, and this is so important because we are hopefully in a God-fearing and God-honoring way, we are changing the trajectory, right? For many of us who are maybe in our, I don't know, late 30s, early 40s, we did grow up in a home where there wasn't a ton of a lot of affirmation, a lot of affection,
Mm,
physical, emotional, and even verbal. But the fact that we get to do that for our children now,
Yeah.
we get to kind of redeem this. Our parents did the best that they could with what they knew.
Yep. That's
mhm.
right.
But by the grace of God, as we continue to receive the joy and the welcome of Jesus, we get to kind of maybe hopefully change the trajectory of how our children and how our youth students are growing up in the home. And to
Mm,
be able to challenge our parents now in our youth ministries in that way, even though like you both of you guys said, it's uncomfortable. They've never received this, so they don't know how to give it. But to kind of give them opportunities to grow in this area, hopefully, Lord willing, it'll bear tons of fruit in the years to come, right?
And can I challenge our listeners real quick with what you just said? I think number one is as you're planning your events throughout the year, consider these moments, these rite of passage moments, like and it, again, balance it out. I mean, have those big fun ones, but then also insert like strategically these rites of passages where you guys can actually plan and help some of these things for families who either it's not on the radar or they don't even know how to do it. I think this is for us here, you guys listening, for us to be the ones who think strategically through this, right? And second thing is take advantage of your events, right? They're not events just to be events. Every event has the opportunity to disciple. I mean, that's what it really should be, honestly. But don't miss out on moments where it can be a very memorable thing. And sometimes we're so quick to either laugh it off or it's sometimes too awkward in events to do something. But hey, don't forget, like we have such a short time with our students to let events just be events, right? So be very intentional about making disciples and creating these type of moments for the people of God.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good word.
that's a good word. On that note, I want to think about maybe some of our fellow youth pastors, youth workers, youth leaders that kind of feel like they're stuck just maintaining and sustaining what they've been doing, and they just feel like there is really no life in their ministry. How would you guys, as kind of as a final word to them, how would you guys encourage them to maybe take a step back and be thoughtful, creative, and where do they start in terms of thinking about their youth ministry year, youth ministry context, and just embedding this light in the sense of resting and rejoicing in the gospel, these rhythms that help them think maybe further along than just kind of that particular month, that particular season. How would you guys encourage them?
I think all of us, and this is including, youth leaders, parents, and everyone else, and the students themselves, we really need to make it, a regular rhythm to spend time with God personally and corporately. We take for granted that kids and families that are raised in churches, maybe that we assume that, oh, wow, they know how to read the Bible for themselves. They know how to reflect and consider and apply. They know how to listen to sermons. They know how to pray. And they probably know on some level and have sat through enough stuff to say, okay, well, that's prayer. That's a sermon. That's the Bible. And that verse sounds familiar. But coming back to the basics of pointing them to the importance of incorporating this into their lives. And that's where having it becoming corporate helps too. So whether it's maybe encouraging certain small groups to examine, how they are when they interact at church with each other, how they employ the use of God's word and understanding of God's word to encourage one another, being able to kind of give a reset in that way of, just kind of tutoring, reminding them of these things and coaching them these things would really be helpful. And I say this in contrast to sometimes, when we go into the new year, we go, oh, hey, let's make resolution. Let's read the Bible this year. Let's get the Bible read in 365 days. I remember growing up with that almost as being the ideal. Oh, let's all read the Bible again this year. And, by January 5th, most of the people have failed, right? In terms of a checklist, in terms of the calendar that they're supposed to do. That's, I don't think, the main point. That's a potential application, but it's not all or nothing. It's actually a continuous, consistent journey and walk with the Lord through his word and through response and obedience and prayer. So even going into next year, I want to ground more and more of our students and our youth counselors and even the youth pastor and I in partnership together to make sure that that's the culture that they're swimming in instead of just constantly attending and constantly just listening, but then having it go out, in one year out the other.
I'm going to throw a challenge out there for you guys who are listening, especially if you guys are in your first couple of years. I mean, we have to be the ones who put in the work in thinking holistically for the youth ministry. And I'm talking about calendar wise too. When you zoom out, right, you should be very strategic. Hey, what does this month do? What does this semester look like? You're the shepherd, right? have an overall view of where you want to lead the sheep. All right. And then every year, it could be the same, but you should be sensitive enough to where as you start to know your sheep, you should know what they need. Maybe you don't need them to move left this year. Maybe you need them to move right. But that's what a shepherd knows. And so every year should be sensitive to your sheep. And again, every year is different. And so if I can challenge you youth pastors and leaders to realize, hey, it's not the same as last year. So technically you can't copy and paste everything because their diet has changed, their worries have changed, their strengths have changed. And so if you keep setting the bar at the same thing, you're not going to give your sheep what they need. And so take stock inventory, and this is the hard work of a shepherd, right? But then sit down with your team, maybe with parents, and just go, okay, what do the sheep need this year? And how do we move them from this pasture to greener pastures by the end of the year so that you're not constantly spinning your wheels? And then this allows you to be creative, to go, hey, what's something that we've wanted to try, but we've never tried? But what are some events that actually help accomplish our goals and objectives for this year for this group of students, right? Because maybe these seniors are super ready to go, and okay, let's how do we move this? And so I think those are points of prayer, points of strategic planning, but also your sheep, right? You should customize your plan for your sheep.
Amen. That's both good words. Only thing I might add is youth pastors, youth leaders, get together with other youth pastors and other youth leaders.
Oh yeah,
Amen.
Your rhythm, to brainstorm together, to pray together, to share ideas together. I think even within our pool, we have a wealth of experience and wisdom that we can share with one another. Let's not be in competition with one another. Let's collaborate. Just collaborate for the kingdom of Jesus. Collaborate for the sake of our students and their families. I think we have a lot to learn from one another. Just like even in this short time, Justin and Terrence, I appreciate you both so much. Thank you for loving Jesus. Thank you for loving the church. And thank you especially for serving the Asian American ministry context that both of you guys are in. With that, thank you all for listening today to the Rooted Asian American Youth Ministry Roundtable. We look forward to the next time. Until then, may the Lord bless you and keep you as you trust in the death and resurrection of Christ to transform the peoples in our homes and in our churches. Be sure to follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also find us on Instagram at the Youth Rooted Ministry. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Asian American Youth Ministry Roundtable, part of the Rooted family of podcasts. You can go even deeper into gospel-centered, Bible-saturated youth ministry by listening to our other podcasts, including the Rooted Youth Ministry Podcast and the Rooted Parent Podcast. Find them all at rootedministry.com.